Nicholas, welcome to the show.
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So, tell us a bit about your backstory. How did you get into construction? What's your experience up to this point in time?
I went to my undergrad. I went to school at Roger Williams for construction management, and then I also I got my MBA a couple of years later, and then right now I'm just about complete with my second master's in management with a construction management concentration at Southern New Hampshire University. As far as construction goes, it's family business. In my family, I'm the fifth generation in construction. Particular company I work for was started by my grandfather, so I'm third generation within that. Goes back to the early '80s. We even have some customers and people that we deal with going back to that knew my grandfather that began their dealings with him. So it's kind of gone from my grandfather to my father, and now kind of I've built those relationships with people.
Excellent. So, tell me about your current role and how that experience has influenced where you are today and what you do.
Okay, so my current role, project manager, project supervisor. So I deal a lot with field operations, running jobs in the field, subcontractor coordination, client coordination. So when I graduated, I started doing a lot of hands-on stuff, to learn the basics as far as understanding how different components, different systems go together. That way, understanding, what's involved with something as simple as, you think of a door and frame, relatively straightforward, but when you start to look at all the different components that go into it, what's involved, all those things to get the installed, priced, and all those different things to understand the mechanics behind it, so that way eventually when I translate that to the office environment, I understand all that hands-on experience was beneficial to understanding different parts of the construction process.
Excellent. Before I started studying, I thought I might want to be an architect, and then I realized I had to have to detail door jams and things like that rather than just the aesthetics of the building. So there's a lot to it, which sort of leads me to this adjunct professor role. So how did you get motivated to jump into that?
So, just kind of looking around, and I had seen the position pop up at, a local university that they were, looking for construction management professor. At that point, I didn't realize it was, in the early stages that they were trying to get the program going. But for me, when I was in school, particularly with the construction management classes, I always kind of got the most out of those classes that were taught by the professors that had that, real world experience, those stories they could tell you, they had the pictures or the videos, or they could relate the material to, real world experiences. They're not just kind of talking about stuff. They had actually walked the walk too. So they understood it, kind of from that construction or that technical level, as opposed to just, seeing it from, reading about it in the book. So that was kind of what led me to that, is I wanted to be able to share what I had learned, to, a new generation of people, studying construction.
Yeah, I think it's extremely valuable to make sure that we're tying in the book to the boots on the ground. So, how do you do it? What are your sort of real world challenges that you bring into the curriculum and training these industry professionals?
So, kind of, I've taught a bunch of different classes, but where I specialize kind of more is the labs, methods and materials, building systems, and construction equipment, because that's kind of where my specialty lies. In that, we can do ground up stuff, so that way I understand, the equipment, the safety, and all those type of things, and then also looking at the hands-on experience. I can bring that to things like looking at concrete, understanding that, looking at aggregates, walls, framing, all those type of things, so that with the labs, it's important to show them that, okay, here's not just a picture of a wall. Here's a bunch of 2x4s. I'm going to tell you how to build the wall, but I'm not going to do it for you. You might do it right, you might do it wrong, but I want you to understand why it's important for stud spacing and layout and those type of things. Why that it takes time, and why that it's such an important process to understand kind of the backstory about the different assemblies and components.
So you must see that light bulb come on. So can you maybe elaborate on that? Some of the practical applications that you have where you've helped these building system lab students to understand the importance of those systems. Have you got an example where they've been hands-on and really that light bulb came on?
Yeah. So, the background with some of the people, they actually do come from that, that trade school, that technical high school background. So they've been introduced to it. But, we'll take one of the walls that we've built in one of the other classes, and then I'll give them some wire or some pipes, all the different components. I'll say, okay, this is how it's going to kind of work. This is what you'll see, but I want you guys to go ahead and do it to see, what's involved with running wires, or things like, looking at pipes, the importance of pitch when you're laying everything out. And then, another thing that I had introduced with them this semester was basically, it was essentially a building system scavenger hunt. I just gave them a giant list of items to find throughout the campus. Generators, fire alarm devices, lights, different components they'd come across. Find them in different buildings. Take pictures of them. Write what they are, what they do, why they're important, and kind of just look at those interrelationships that all these building systems kind of come together for that end product, that customer is ultimately looking for.
I mean, you kind of answered one of my next questions, which was around, what teaching methods do you find are most useful, particularly for those things that are a little bit harder, or go unnoticed, like MEP. It's behind drywall in most circumstances. And so how do people who have never seen any of those elements before, how do they go and learn about them and kind of get hands on?
So what, like when we have, when you start each of the different MEP sections, I start with, I find a short intro video online to kind of introduce the topic, looking at, basic electrical circuits, or, water piping and drains. And then we just kind of take that, and just running through that, looking at different wire types, the gauges, the role of, you got your, in a standard wire, you got your three different wires, why they're colored, what each one of them does. And then, basically we go ahead, we run all the circuits, connect the plugs, connect the light, whatever it's going to be. And then, we'll go ahead and kind of power it up, see if it works, showing that's kind of how it happens. If it doesn't work, looking at different things like troubleshooting, just kind of saying that, you might get the whole building done. Electrician does something, goes to turn it on, and, circuit trips. Now kind of got to troubleshoot, is it a problem with the breaker? Is something overloaded? Are two wires touching? Is something arcing? So kind of figuring out, how these things all fit in. Like you said, you don't really see any of them. So, I want them to be able to understand that, you look at this wall, this classroom, you got a bunch of drywall, you got all your ceilings, you can't see anything, but without any of that, behind the scenes type of stuff, this is, basically just a square box with kind of nothing in it.
Interesting. So it's about really getting hands on. That's great. So um, a lot of things change often with the technology, and in particular the regulations and standards. So how do you ensure that the curriculum that you're teaching, keeps up with all of that?
So where that kind of comes into play is my, being on site every day. You can kind of, it's a lot of it is making sure, not only making sure that everybody shows up and dealing with the coordination, but a lot of it's just kind of watching, seeing what they're doing, asking questions. A lot of it, you see over time, and, you'll notice, for 10 years, something's been going the same way. And then all of a sudden, the plumber, the electrician's doing something different. So you go ahead and say, hey, did something change? What's going on? So it's just a lot of just interacting with people. You build relationships with, some of these different subcontractors of people for 10 or 15 years. So you have these relationships, and you can kind of ask them questions, bounce stuff off them. So you can kind of, as obviously they're going to be doing the work, but you can kind of use that as a learning tool as well, that you can translate to other jobs, or in this case, I kind of take it back to the classroom.
What are the sort of common misconceptions that confuse students or even professionals when it comes to MEP? One of the things that I always thought, thanks to Hollywood films, was that when one fire sprinkler goes off, the entire sprinkler goes off throughout the building. So, what are some of the misconceptions that you come across?
When, like I said, everybody, when it comes to kind of the MEP stuff, everybody thinks that it's, really, really technical, which on some levels it is when it's coming to the design and different things. But a lot of it can kind of be broken down into simple components, looking at, the wires. You got all these different gauges of wires, but they still got the, multiple wires inside, or looking at, the plumbing connections, with whether, looking at soldering or ProPress, or some of the different ways to connect it. It's all, it looks technical, but you can kind of just break it down into smaller areas with, the pipes, the pitch, the connection, to kind of see how they all go together. Obviously, looking at design, that's going to be, technically complex, sizing pipes and all that type of stuff, or working in a panel. But outside of that, design aspect of it's can be fairly straightforward if you just kind of step back and look at the different pieces of it.
Yeah, I agree. There are some very similar traits between electrical and mechanical, that's for sure. So, just for our audience, it'd be great to hear how you've trained your teams and educated them some tips and tactics that you've used. Leave the comments below. Um, Nicholas, back to you in terms of the emerging trends for MEP. What should construction professionals be aware of? What's coming out in the field? What are you excited about?
So with kind of even things that I've seen evolve, the biggest thing is the utilization of kind of technology and software. It's becoming, more and more commonplace. Like the 3D modeling, the BIM modeling, these walkthroughs that, you can do all these different types of 3D renderings, and then, you can kind of pull the wall back and you can see all the different components within the wall. So it kind of takes those 2D drawings that you might look at, and a lot of people kind of get overwhelmed. They get confused by them. These, this technology, this stuff that you can kind of just break the project down. It's like you're walking through the front door of the project and you can see what it's going to look like finished. And then you can see everything that's inside the walls, underground, overhead. And you can kind of look at all the different components, and, continuing even with the software, with all the different cloud-based technology, that everybody can kind of access that common database, when you're building a job. So that way, things need to get updated. Everybody's got that access with, designers, plumbers, electricians, everybody involved, so they can see it. They can upload their input, pictures, so that they can kind of, everybody's on the same page, as opposed to, everybody's kind of just going in different directions.
Excellent. Then putting on your project manager hat here, depending on if you're a general or self-performing, there's obviously a lot of trades on a job site and a lot of moving parts. So how do you feel about the coordination of these trades and the best practices? What are some of the real tactical things that you can do to keep a project on time and on budget?
So it's, the biggest thing is planning and scheduling, knowing kind of who's going to be needed, when they're going to be needed, looking at kind of relationships, making sure people aren't going to be in the way of one another. It's just, a lot of it just involves making sure that, kind of like with the software, it's just making sure that everybody's on the same page, understanding when they're needed, what you need them to do, having that kind of coordination and logistics every day with them, so they know what you expect of them, making sure that they show up when they're supposed to, looking at inspections, kind of say you start with your framing. Until your framing's done, you can't start doing anything within the walls, no electrical, no plumbing. So it's important to, if your framing is going to be, wrapped up and, on Monday, making sure that you've given, anybody doing in-wall stuff, at least a week of notice. That way you say, hey, I'd like you here on Tuesday, so you can start doing all your stuff in walls, instead of, Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock saying, hey, I need you here tomorrow to, start doing your thing.
Got it. And so that's looking at the field. What about looking back at the stakeholders as a project manager, talking to the client, coordinating with the supply chain, the vendors, the finance team? What are some best practices in looking in the other direction and making sure that you're still delivering those projects?
Biggest thing is kind of just staying on top of everything, and a big part of it, honestly, it comes down to being honest with people. With something like, obviously with the supply chain issues, if you're starting to notice items getting delayed, give the customer, give the stakeholders as much notice as possible. Don't wait till the last minute and say, hey, we're not going to be able to get your HVAC unit, and they'll say, how long have you known? Say, I've known for 2 weeks. If they get involved, you need to keep them involved in the process early. That way they can kind of do the planning on their end. If they're planning to move in or, use that space, on a particular date, they need to know what's going on, so that they can kind of, deal with the coordination on their end.
So then how do you feel about safety? So safety is obviously a major issue in construction, significant number of injuries and deaths each year. As a project manager, what are some of the best practices that you've implemented to really improve safety on your job sites?
So it's just making sure that kind of everybody understands that, obviously construction is a dangerous profession. You look at OSHA, they got their own set of rules and regulations specifically for the construction industry. So it's just some of it comes down to you've built relationships with people, and they know what you expect out of them. When people start showing up on the job, you kind of just look at how they operate and making sure they got the proper tools. Things like ladders in particular. You can kind of gauge something as simple as what size ladder you think they'll need. If you got 10 or 12-foot ceilings and they roll up the first day with a 6-foot ladder, obviously on their end safety's gone out the door. So it's just staying on top of people, making sure that they abide by all the rules, making sure that they don't do anything, or obviously sometimes things kind of get overlooked and they'll try to do something. It's just stopping it before it becomes a problem. Like for me, one of my biggest things when it comes to safety is the electrical panel is, I understand obviously you're going to be working electrical panel, doing your thing. Not a problem. But if you're going to be gone for any more than a minute or two, it doesn't take long. Just, throw that cover back on there. Doesn't take much to trip. Somebody, jams a screwdriver or something into the panel. So it's just making sure something as simple as, they know what you expect of them. So that way there's not going to be any problems.
Yeah, I mean, electrocution is part of the fatal four, so it's a big one, that's for sure. Anything else around machinery and safety? Is there something that you've done and implemented with best practices, be that light equipment or heavy equipment?
It's a lot of it's kind of just making sure everybody's aware of the surroundings, making sure clear paths. Big one obviously is making sure everybody's got the proper safety gear. They got their high visibility clothing on. They got their hard hats on. Unfortunately, not on any of our jobs, but you hear stories from different people. And ultimately sometimes some of the people that have been involved in some of these construction accidents. So you want them to realize that it's not a good smart idea. It's not good to just oh yeah, I can just run behind that excavator real quick or behind that front end loader. I can make it by. All it takes is that one lapse in judgment, and something catastrophic can happen, which is kind of where the teaching comes into that. With the equipment and the safety comes, it becomes important. So we look at, for all the different machinery types, what type of things can happen, whether it's, getting hit by something, dropping something, electrocution, getting run over, and that, that it's not a joke. This is kind of serious stuff that, you can get paralyzed, injured, you can get killed. That if you think, have one kind of thing, oh yeah, I think I'll be fine, but, it might not happen.
Yeah, it's certainly no joke, and I'm glad to hear that it's part of the curriculum. So, just getting back to the students, then, because there's a huge labor shortage in construction, and we've got to do something about that. What networking and industry connection opportunities do you see for students to progress their career path and make sure that they are seen and really wanting to stay in the industry?
Yeah, so like you said, with the labor shortage, like construction is obviously a kind of a very hot market right now as far as job opportunities. So I know at Roger Williams, at SNHU, all these different schools, they built partnerships with a lot of local or regional construction firms. That way, they show up to job fairs, they introduce what they do. It allows the students too to kind of see different aspects of construction. Maybe they want to go commercial, residential, maybe they want to go thing like bridge construction or different things like that. So they can kind of see what these different companies have to offer, not only as far as types of projects they have, but even just different roles. Whether you want to kind of go on that track to end up in the office, track to end up in the field, running jobs in the field. So you can kind of look at it, what your options are. And then at SNHU, with some of the alumni, with the grads from the program, I remain in contact with them, via LinkedIn, so they can I can see what's going on with them. They reach out to me every once in a while. They might say, hey, my company has a job opening, or we're looking for, graduates. Can you spread the word? Can you reach out? Or, you think there's anybody that might be interested? So it's kind of just, building those relationships, those partnerships with the different firms, so that, year after year, that, they can expect, some good quality, candidates to come forward for them.
Excellent. So for our viewers, it'd be great to hear in the comments below about what you see as the best way to improve this labor shortage within the industry. Some tips would be fantastic down there in the comments. Nicholas, I want to thank you for your time. It's always great to hear somebody that has a good mix of teaching and MBA and family history and project management. So really appreciate your insights here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed being on.
Excellent. To our viewers, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this content, and be sure to check us out next time. See you later.